Okay, we are live.
Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl.
Good morning, Beena. Good morning. Good morning, Marcus. Good morning. Meant to
Yes,
be here.
hope you are doing
Meant
well.
to be here. Yes. I'm keen to have something special to share today, but we'll get to that in a moment. Let me just do
Yes,
all
yes,
the sharing and get there.
yes. Welcome to Live Brain also, and I hope that our regular viewer and of course I just consider her as a participant. Norma would be there. Hello, Norma. If you are there and you will be here, I'm saying in advance, hello and welcome. Today's thought: doing things together. It's a very interesting activity, whatever you are doing. Okay, it's a mundane work, it's your office work, it is something you are doing as your business, or just fun activity like painting or drawing and art stuff. When you do something together, there are of course some pros and cons of it. Sometimes you cannot do things exactly as you want to and you would prefer to do, and also that sometimes you have to give your energy to explaining things and it takes a bit more time. But what are the benefits of doing something together? First thing, learning patience. Your patience level, of course, you have to have good patience, otherwise you cannot do things together. And the most important thing is learning how to communicate. Most of the time,
Yes.
assumptions in communication, that okay, because I'm saying it clearly, it will communicate it will be communicated clearly, which is not the case most of the time. Sometimes we are not paying attention. Sometimes something just, for instance, something just grab our attention. Sometimes a glitch in a network. Sometimes it's just lagging. Another person is saying something and it is not coming to you on the time, and you are saying, and you sometimes we just nod, like in our mind, that person is even they are sitting by thousands of miles away, but you are just, okay, yes, now I understand. Okay, so you nod, but we learn to communicate much better even if we are doing it physically in the same premises. Still we learn to communicate things better. Doing things together is like, of course, like, okay, having different energy, different perspective, different understanding for things, which is really helpful. For me, the two most important benefits, of course there are tons of other benefits also, but two most important: first, it increases your patience, and second, it encourages you to pay attention to your communication, which is a big deal. Once we try to, okay, I'm saying trying because I don't know that, okay, I don't know anyone who is 100% perfect in communication. Yes, they are reaching there, but not 100%. So I'm just saying that, okay, this is something to strive for. This is something to look for, because it is not limited to our working together. It is also about living together. It is also about uh, being in relationship in any way, communication and communicating, especially people who are into more into feminine energy. They are more into feelings and showing gestures rather than being vocal about, okay, in a different way when they have to ask and need something. Doing things together with different people makes you enable to communicate your needs, wants and desires, and of course your work related things much better. Learn to communicate it much better, and it improves your overall life quality also. I'm using the word life quality here because if you are not in a good relationship, it affects everything in your life.
Yeah.
It really deprive you from the goodness of life, and you can't thrive if you are not in a good relationship. It can be a work relationship or also a personal. So
Very
please
important.
do pay attention to communication and the magic and the haphazardness of communication, and try to learn it together. So thank you so much for giving me this time, Syl. Now we can, I hope that we are all ready to start doing the reading, capital R reading of Don Juan and Via, Carlos.
What did you call him? What do you call him?
I'm just saying Castaneda.
Oh, you said Via. I thought you said Via.
No, I was saying Via. Like, okay, where? Via. Okay. By Carlos, not directly coming from Don Juan. Again,
Via, Carlos. Oh, it sounded completely different the way you said it. Okay, anyway, on IG, I want to say hello to Hebi has joined us, and Siri has joined us, Syl Saleri, and Beena Sidd, and Duskatari. Duskatari Q. So wonderful, wonderful. Glad to see you all here. This is fantastic. All right, now, we've been talking in the previous 2 sessions. We were dealing with the 4 natural enemies as Don Juan defines them. Let's not assume this is absolute. But see, my background today, got the 4 statues there. So see, 4 enemies. Okay. Now, those aren't actually representative of that, but nonetheless, they, or they might be. It's possible. I don't know, but not necessarily so. Brilliant. So and S said also on IG. So fantastic. However, this 4 natural enemies, this is a big deal. Yeah. And there may be more. Like I said, to me, habit and belief, I feel are very profound enemies. Yes, that we need to consider. And of course, the big one, unawareness. But I feel habit and belief and unawareness, those are enemies before you get onto the path of knowledge. If you're getting onto the path of knowledge in a very deliberate and specific way, I think you've already somewhat dealt with at least 2 out of 3 of those enemies, unawareness and belief. Right? Because you are starting a process of learning. If you start learning, you're questioning your beliefs, you're thinking about your awareness, at least hopefully. Right? You may not be aware of habits. That's why habits is so dangerous. However, I want to share a video today that I made, right? And it relates to being on a path of some kind. It doesn't have to be a path of knowledge. That's just terminology. Path of learning, path of growing, path of self-improvement, path of self-development, path of self-discovery, whatever you call it. It doesn't matter, right? The point is that you are starting a journey towards moreness. It's an infinite journey, which is what its magical is. When we consider it as a journey into moreness, not a journey towards moreness, a journey into moreness. All right, that's a big difference. Okay, very important. Now, when and this terminology, journey into moreness, very critical. Actually, I am going to add that to my dictionary of power. So it's very important. Now, I don't think I've used that exact terminology before, or if I have, I don't remember doing so. Nonetheless, this journey into moreness, however it is for you, and of course, it's going to be very, very different for everybody concerned. Yes? Nobody's going to have the same journey. Right, Beena?
Yes.
Right, Beena? All right.
Yes.
So this is important. This is very, very important. Sorry, I'm trying to open this file while I chat, and it's giving me a hard time here.
Okay.
This journey to moreness. This is something that if you want to have moreness as a person, yeah.
Interesting.
It's different to having moreness externally. Yeah.
Yes.
You want to have moreness as a person. If you want to be more, that is a very, very, very important decision. Now, is this something that everybody has to do? No, of course, it's your choice, right? However, it's a choice that we don't make because we're not aware of moreness. We think all that we know of is all there is. And this, of course, is a grave, grave, grave mistake. Yeah? One that we make at our peril. So, the point that I'm getting to, and it's connected to this journey to become a person of knowledge, as Don Juan calls it. We might not conceive of it that way, but let's conceive of it as a journey to moreness, whatever that may mean to you. But really, it's a journey of self-improvement, self-discovery, self-awareness, etc. Right? That's the journey of being who you really would like to be and who you really are inside, but you want to be able to live and be who you are. Now that sounds like a contradiction, but we have an idea of ourselves. Yes, we are good people, we are ethical, but actually applying those ethics and applying that goodness, this we have to learn. Okay? We are good people, we are ethical, we have integrity, but we have to learn to apply it, use it, put it into being, be able to share it, be able to use it. Yeah? And that is the journey. And so it's a very subtle point that I am making. This is not a point you'll find anywhere else. That we are more, but we have to learn to become what we already are. It sounds contradictory, but once you start on this journey into moreness, it all makes sense. All right. Now, I want to connect it all together. The path of knowledge, the journey into moreness, the four natural enemies, the decision to start and learn and do and become and be more, etc. It's all going to be understood and shared and connected in this little short video that I'm going to share. And I'm glad I remember to turn off my music this time because, it always plays for me and I just, I enjoy it, but I don't notice it like that it's on, I forget. So I turned that off. So, all right, so yeah, we're going to go. We're going to share. And this video, it's really, it's a little poem, well, two poems, but it represents something very significant, which I'll share afterwards. But keep it in mind, we are going to be looking at this video in the context of the journey into moreness, the path of knowledge, the four natural enemies. Yes? And learning and growing and improving and getting started, etc. Right? Very, very important. All right, let's move this and then make this full screen, and here we go. All right, so listen closely and watch closely also. Let's wait for my screen to stop going black. Come on now. There we go. Just take my screen a little while to get updated. So there we go. All right, you ready, Beena?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Are you sharing with sound?
You always got to tell me if you don't hear. I was about to ask you if you can hear. So obviously you can't. All right, so yeah. No, I am sharing. So yeah, tell me, Beena, you can say anything.
I think this is what I did.
Yeah, I'll say tsunami. Sorry. Okay. Yes, I am sharing with. Oh, let me see. I didn't the screen share. I didn't put the sound on. Yeah, dang it. And I remembered to do so, and then as I did it, I forgot. All right. Share. All right. There we go. There we go. Full screen again. Yeah, no, the sound should be on. Must be playing. All right, here we go.
Today is the day for self-change. Today is the day we'll look back on as in the day later never comes. Today is the day to plant our tree of real self. Today is the day we'll look back on and say, back in the day, I took action. I did something huge, even though to some it seemed small. I planted the seed, my seed of real self. But I did more back in the day. I watered that seed, tended, nourished my seed. As seedling grew to sapling, I nurtured my real self, daily, constantly, never allowing any opportunity for my treeling to cease growing through neglect. I persisted while my roots of real self grew deep. Then, back on a day, I found my tree of real me no longer needed myself, and I became my tree of real. Yes, back in the day, I did something. Now, every day is the day of real me. Where has the day gone? Day slips sliding away, away, tick into night. Swallowed and lost, forgotten the light. Day, gone away. It is, what can I say?
Wonderful.
Today is the day for self.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.
Right. I'm hoping this is making a very profound point. Now, I think I need to reread that because I noticed I couldn't quite hear some of the words, and I hope you could, right? It's the tree of
Yes.
real me, for instance, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, so
Yes.
I must put subtitles there to make it clear. But we can read the poem itself.
But it is, yes.
Now,
It is so beautiful. So beautiful.
it is. Now, this, why am I sharing this? Yes? Why? Why am I sharing this? What is important about those two poems? There's two poems actually. Right? Why? Why? In the context, why am I sharing it?
You want me to answer that? Because
Okay, I want to read this poem again, or you read it this time, Beena. Right? This from here. Today is the day of self-care. Go ahead.
today is the day for self-change. Today is the day we look back. Okay, today is the day we look back on as in the day later never comes. Today is the day to plant our tree of real self. Today is the day we look back on and say, back in the day, I took action. I did something huge, even though to some it seemed small. I planted the seed, my seed of real self. But I did more. Back in the day, I watered that seed, tended, nourished my seed as seedling grew to sapling. I nurtured my real self daily, constantly, never allowing any opportunity for my trailing to cease growing through neglect. I persisted while my roots of real self grew deep. Then, back on a day, I found my tree of real me no longer needed myself, and I became my tree of real. Yes, back in the day. I do something. So I did
did.
something. Yes, I did something now. Every day is the day of real me.
Read that last
The young
paragraph
man.
again, please. Yes.
I persisted
No, from
while my
yes. From
roots of
yes.
real
From
self.
yes. From yes.
Yes, back in the day, I did something new. Now every day is the day of real me.
Now,
Young
comma,
man.
every day is the day of real me. See to get the rhythm right. Yes.
Yes.
Back in the day, I did something. Now, every day is the day of real me, young man.
Yes.
So read the little last one. It goes with it. They go together.
Do you want me to read it again?
Yes. No, no. Read the last part. It's a two-in-one
Okay.
poem. So yeah.
Yes. Where has the day gone? Day slips sliding away, away, away. Tick, tick into night, solid and lost. Forgotten the light. Day, gone away, gone away. It is, it is. What can I say?
So the second poem obviously is about time. Time is precious. Yes. And we say, where's the
Yes,
day gone? But when you look at this in the bigger context, you could also, the day is your night, life. Yes?
yes,
See? Tick, tick into night, swallowed and lost, forgotten the light. Yeah? Now, you can
yes,
also take it as just as we grow up and you become an adult and you start doing whatever, and the same thing happens, right? That you forget the light. And it just
yes,
that dayness, that brightness of youth gets swallowed and lost. Yeah. And then people like come to midlife crisis and they say, oh, day, gone away, gone away. Where is it? Yeah. And then they start panicking. Don't wait until those times. Do it now. And even if you are, you might be 99 or 125 or whatever. It's never too late. You start now, right? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. See? Same thing here.
yes,
So this is about planting the tree of self, right? If we go back to the beginning, right? I to plant our tree of real self.
yes,
Today is the day. But this now there's a nuance to this poem because the author's looking back and said, I did do that. I did plant my tree 20 years ago, yeah, or more. Right? So
yes,
celebrate that. See? So it's all together. But again, what did Don Juan say? Don once said that a person of knowledge is someone who has faithfully persisted in pursuing the path of knowledge, right, as far as they can go. Right? I'm paraphrasing slightly. Right? So
yes,
look what the young man says. The young man says, right, back in the day, I took action. I did something huge, even though to some it seemed small. I planted the seed, my seed of real self. But I did more. So you don't just to start. This is very important. Back in the day, I watered that seed, tended, nourished my seed. And you see, tended and nourished on their own lines here for the emphasis, right? I watered that seed, tended, nourished my seed. As seedling grew to sapling, I nurtured my real self daily, constantly, never allowing any opportunity for my treeling to cease growing through neglect. Right? This is absolutely key because, like a tree, you can start this journey if you neglect it, and then it's going to die, and you have to start all over again. Right? I persisted while my roots of real self grew deep. Yeah? Then, back on the day, I found my tree of real me. Very poetic here, young man. No longer needed myself. It's fantastic. Very, very poetic. Yes, Beena? And I became my tree of real. Right? Very, very important here. I wanted to just emphasize this before we go into chapter 4, because this is so crucial that we understand this necessity of getting started. And not only getting started, but of maintaining our efforts. Yes, got to maintain
yes,
those efforts. Got to be doing this daily, every day. It's got to be the main theme in your life. In the same way as, earning a living is a main theme. This is more important. Yeah. Earning a living, you've got a lot of leeway, many ways to earn a living. You can take a break sometimes, and, but this needs to be constant so that you absolutely train yourself that you're doing it in all instances. When you learn to take the joy out of it in all instances, you will always be having fun. You will always be having joy. Why? Because you enjoy learning. You enjoy joy. And this is where Beena and I find ourselves. Right, Beena? We are taking
Yes.
joy in this journey into Moreness. Fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic thing. Really most magical. Alright, so no comments to deal with. And we shall then go and continue our reading. Alright, so chapter 4. Chapter 4. We are starting. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. Go ahead, Beena.
Okay. Wow, it's okay. Chapter 4.
One moment, sorry. I'm not seeing my Zoom window for some reason. I don't know what happened to that. Not this one. Okay, never mind. All right, let's go back here. It's very strange. All right, go ahead, Beena.
It is taking time, Syl. It is just uploading. It's not clear yet. Okay, now. Don Juan seldom spoke openly about Mescalito. Every time I questioned him on the subject, he refused to talk. But he always said enough to create an impression of Mescalito, an impression that was always anthropomorphic.
Correct.
Yes. Mescalito was a male, not only because of the mandatory grammatical rule that gives the word a masculine gender, but also because of his constant qualities of being a protector and a teacher. Don Juan reaffirmed these characteristics in various forms every time we talked. Sunday, 24 December 1961. The devil's weed has never protected anyone. This is yours, I guess.
Right. By the way, we were talking about power plants, yes? And Carlos early on says he identifies the 4-4i Williams side for the peyote and the Tura something or other for the devil's weed and possibly psilocybin. Yeah. And in this categorization, he has set a framework of perception which is distorted. So when we come to these allies, we think the allies are the Jimson weed or the devil's weed and the mushroom, but that's not so. Right? Just to be clear here. Don Juan never ever said the ally is in the mushroom. That's just an assumption. Where do we get this from? Pure inference. Because Carlos emphasized those 3 plants as being the key. So we take from that, we've created a framework and now we stuff this in there. No, he says very, very clearly on multiple occasions, the ally is the smoke. And it's a mixture of all sorts of things, of which this possibly, psilocybin, possibly, we don't know for sure, possibly is an ingredient. We don't know if it's the main ingredient, the critical ingredient, or if it's just one of many. But it's the smoke that is the ally. Whereas with the devil's weed, the entire plant is the ally. Not the juice or sauce or liquid that they cook from it, right? See, it's 2 different things here. The plant itself as personality. Right? It's a she, and he has to tend and nurture this plant. Now, the plant that they used and the plant that he nurtures are two different individual plants. But when you understand this perception on plants, when Don Juan talks about devil's weed, it's every single plant there is, right? The entity that he's talking about is in all the plants, correct? Right? Make sense? But anyway, so in the case of the devil's weed, it is the plant itself that is the ally. Whereas in the case of the other, whatever the ingredients is, the smoke itself is the ally. Right? Very key to understand this. So how much the supposedly psilocybin is critical, we don't know. Right? It may or may not be. Right? It may be just the procedure that matters. Plus, there's something that we have to keep in mind. Now, it's not obvious now, but it will become later. But it's helpful to know this information from later now. Don Juan's personal power makes a difference on Carlos and can shift him and affect his perception of reality. Okay? So the smoke itself, he may just have picked things at random and just dried it up, and the whole thing may be a rigmarole that is purely ritual to shift Carlos, as Don Juan will explain later on about the trip. Right? So we don't know that there's necessarily any specific plant, any hallucinogenic plant necessarily in the smoke. Right? It may just be the whole ritual that gets Carlos to shift and move. And we'll learn more about the shifting and moving later. There's a lot more to come on. Right? So I just wanted to be clear because it's so easy to assume it's all about plants and the the medicine plants or the hallucinogenic plants. No, not necessarily. And in this case, the ally is the devil's weed. Yes, that is plant now, but the other one is in the smoke, not in the plant. Right? Maybe an ingredient, but the ally is the smoke. All right, I just wanted to clarify that. It came up in comments somewhere in chat. So I just wanted to clarify this. Very important. I didn't dare, and that's how I do it now. All right, go ahead, Beena.
Okay. But you said mescalito is terrifying at times.
Oh, I didn't read that. All right, sorry. Are we going to read it? All right, yeah, sorry. So let's start. Sunday, 24 December, 1961. The devil's weed has never protected anyone. She serves only to give power. Mescalito, on the other hand, is gentle, like a baby.
You said mescalito is terrifying at times?
Of course, he's terrifying. But once you get to know him, he's gentle and kind. And by the way, when it came to man of knowledge, we have been reading it as personal knowledge because there it's appropriate. Here, the masculine gender is appropriate because mescalito, it's not mescali, just mescalite, right? Without any gender, the O makes it masculine. Otherwise, it was feminine, would be mescalita, right? So this is important. This is important. Yeah. Joseph is here. Let's see what Joseph has to say. A native view. Each plant has a spirit. The ally is a spirit. Yes, I understand this, Joseph. But we have to take Don Juan in Don Juan's context. Yes, much of what Don Juan or some of what Don Juan says corresponds to the native view, but not all. Because so much of what Don Juan shares comes from his lineage view. And his lineage stretches back in time all the way to the Toltecs. Now, many misunderstood this when Don Juan said, yes, they started way back in the Toltecs, to think that his knowledge is Toltec knowledge. And if you go look up Toltec wisdom, you're going to see all the stuff from Carlos there, or at least from Don Juan. But this is also a mistake. It comes from his lineage. He says there are other lineages. And yes, they have things that they do the same, but there are also differences, right? So we can only say and give the proper context for Don Juan's knowledge is within his lineage. For instance, when I was talking about the difference between the ally and spirit, and the way Don Juan is using this word ally, right? In the case of the smoke, it refers to the smoke, not the plant, right? So each plant has a spirit, yes. But in this case, that smoke mixture is made up of many plants. So it would be many spirits combining together then, if you want to think of it that, right? So it's very important that he calls the smoke the ally, not the mixture, not the original plant. And beside which, like I said, it's many plants. So it's not one, whereas the Jimson weed, that's one that they're doing it from. Different parts of the plant, yes, but it's a progression. But also, the plant that they used to make the mixture that Carlos took, then he said to Carlos he had a separate plant that he was nurturing, right? And then Carlos had to go and plant it and tend that. So the plant gets transferred from one individual entity plant to the spirit which inhibits all the plants, right? So that spirit, which is an ally, yes, it's a different usage of the word ally again. At least the word ally is being used by Don Juan in many different ways, as I pointed out earlier. And in this case, the ally in the spirit being Jimson weed, that's typical to the native view. However, when he calls the smoke the ally, he never says anything about the mushroom. This is purely Carlos's conjecture. There may not even be mushroom in it, psilocybin, right? And like I said, the plant mixture, the smoke mixture, this may be totally not of issue what's in there, right? It may just be the procedure. We don't know. And I'm saying this based on later things that Don Juan does, where he can affect Carlos's perception of reality, and not just Carlos, but some of the other apprentices and even others that he just knew. And simply through the use of his personal power. So the whole thing may simply be just a ritual to get Carlos there, right? But the smoke, because he talks about smoke in other places also, right? And smoke having its own power, right? So he's, we have to take Don Juan in his full context. So in this case, Joseph, I just want to emphasize that I'm making this distinction because we cannot look at Don Juan from a native perspective. Right? Yes, it has some relevance, but we are going to get mistaken, like Carlos, to assume what Don Juan is teaching is a yucky way of knowledge, when Don Juan is simply saying, I am a yucky. Right? Now, what he says is much more than yuckiness, right? And much of what's to come, it comes from his lineage, not from Toltec origins, root, nothing. No, it comes from his lineage, his study, right? And people in his lineage are from all over the world. They aren't necessarily Native American, right? As we'll find out later, right? Germans and whatever in there, right? So all sorts of different people involved. So this is it's an international thing, and I don't want to. It's got nothing to do with where you come from. It's totally irrelevant. It is the lineage, the knowledge, and being passed on, and each one in the lineage goes further, and they take it further. The lineage knowledge is its own entity that moves along down the lineage, and it's very important. So we have to take Don Juan completely in his own context, which is unique. It's very, very important. If we start putting Don Juan into boxes, then we have a problem, because you're going to be like Carlos to say, oh, it's a yucky way of knowledge. No, it's not, right? And you'll notice that as in later editions of the book, they actually dropped that subtitle, which is quite fascinating. Right? Very, very subtly, they didn't make a big fuss about it. And he never actually sort of said anything about this specifically, Carlos, but he did come to sort of say, yeah, I got it all wrong. So it's very important to understand. Right? Yes, there is much overlap, of course, like Mescalito and stuff like this. But this is Carlos's emphasis right now. Yeah. And later we'll see there's an emphasis that I will share at the time. I'll show you it's very Buddhist, yeah, or very other things. Yeah, I mean we can even see lots of Musashi in here or Sun Tzu. Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap with many, many things. Yes. I mean, there's a guy who wrote the book about where all this knowledge is elsewhere in the world, right? And I'll point it out as it comes up too, because I've read all this stuff, right? And I see the overlap. But it's the togetherness, the cohesiveness that is the key. Don Juan has a unique cohesiveness that's not found anywhere else, and also a great use of language. Yeah, yeah. Correct, correct. Joseph says the spirit is the separate reality. The lineage is just one way to talk about the reality that is always to be grasping at straws to explain it in words. Well, I don't know about grasping at straws. The lineage is a very real thing here. And it's his particular lineage, Don Juan's, as we'll learn later, right? This is not lineage as in his father and mother. I'm talking about lineage from his benefactor and his benefactor's benefactor and so on, right? That's what he calls them, benefactors. His teacher, his benefactor. But he calls them benefactors. Right? Sometimes he says teacher too, but he principally refers to them as benefactors, which is a very different word. Right? So that's the lineage I'm talking about. But again, the separate reality is not always the spirit. Yes, your statement is accurate. The spirit is, we say the separate. It is a separate reality, not the. Because Don Juan affects separate realities in Carlos without the use of spirit, at least spirits from plants, right? Nature spirits, as you want to call it that way. He does too, but you'll see how this goes as we go along. But really, when it comes to, in Don Juan's language, shifting your assemblage point, and the assemblage point is what puts your reality together, that is what makes the shift and causes separate realities. Spirit is merely one of the mechanisms, or the spirit, at least when it's coming from plants, right, or nature. They are one tool for doing this. The principal tool, as far as Don Juan is concerned, to do this is stopping the internal dialogue. Right? That's the chief tool, and which that's independent of spirit, of course. So yes, I understand your usage here, Joseph. But again, see, what I'm sharing is to understand that we need to share Don Juan in his own context, because later on we're going to see. Right now, there's a big overlap with native perspective, because Carlos has deliberately put it into his book in that way. Remember, this was Carlos's doctoral thesis, right, as an anthropologist. Right? This book is what he submitted as his thesis. Now, put it into an academic view, a yucky way of knowledge and all about the plants and the medicinal plant and blah, blah, blah. This was revolutionary at the time. This was just like, wow, it was so radical and out there. It almost didn't get submitted, right? They almost rejected it. And he had to get some people on the faculty to help him and support him, and it was like a whole political thing to get it done. And it was very radical at the time. But of course, it was also tapping into things that people were studying that were cool and like kind of the hot topic of the time, and it was all that. But we'll see a completely different from book 2 and 3, very different, and then the later books they get completely different again. Right? So we have to be very careful here of forcing Don Juan into a native point of view like Carlos. Yeah, because yes, he is a yuppie, but this is not the principal influence in his life, at least where he is now, not by a long measure, right? As we'll come to see, right? It is lineage influence that is the key influence, not Toltec or anything else, but the lineage. Yeah, and of course from his benefactor and his benefactor's benefactor. Don Juan is quite unique. And he says he was very lucky that he not only had his own benefactor, which everybody has, but that he knew and interacted extensively with his benefactor's benefactor. His benefactor is called Don Julian, and his benefactor's benefactor is called Don Elias. His grandfather, you could think of it that way. Think of Julian as his father, right? So his grandfather. And then, of course, there's women involved too. And then there's the greater party. As we get to meet them, there's 16 of them. It's like a big deal, right? The lineage is not a small thing, right? You know, the main one, we'll get into this later. It's very complicated. But the lineage is a big deal. A lot of people involved, and they're from all over the show, as we'll get to see in Don Juan's party, right? They're from all different places. So I just wanted to make this very clear that we must be very careful of not boxing Don Juan into a particular box. Yeah, very, very cool. I mean, to say he's native, you know, some people might say, yeah, well, but he's from Mexico, he's Mexican. Again, see, that would be a great mistake, you see. So we have to be very important here to separate this out. All right, where were we? Yes, okay. Of course, he's terrifying, but once you get to know him, he's gentle and kind. Beena? It may be muted.
How does he show his kindness?
He's a protector and a teacher.
How does he protect?
You can keep him with you at all times, and he will see that nothing bad happens to you. Wow.
How can you keep him with you all the times, at all times?
In a little bag, fastened under your arm or around your neck with a string.
Do you have him with you?
No, because I am an ally, but other people do.
What does he teach?
All right, I'll come back to this in a second.
Okay.
Joseph says the lineage is clearly coming from a native perspective. In this book, yes, Joseph, but in later books, no. No, absolutely not. Sorry. There is overlap in this book because Carlos is emphasizing Mescalito, Peyote, etc., right? And the devil's weed. But this is the emphasis here of this. But in later books, the emphasis like on the whole thing with the eagles, the rule, and all that stuff. That's not native stuff. This is lineage stuff. So when you look at the entire series, you'll see that you have to take out the native perspective. It's a small part of it. And they use stuff that I'll point out to you is completely Buddhist. Yes, or other like Sun Tzu or Musashi or whatever. Right? You can't say where it comes from. People try to say this, but it's coming from his lineage, the growth of knowledge, building upon knowledge. Yes, there is native perspective in there, obviously, yes, but it's not only native perspective. Yes? I mean, I've never seen anything about an assemblage point, for instance, that whole cosmology, that whole understanding, and not only native, but anywhere in the world, right? It's very unique to Carlos, to Don Juan and to his perspective, which is again coming from his lineage. As he'll explain, they figured the stuff out, they tested and worked and, they did a lot of trial and error to research things, right? So Don Juan says, let's see, what does he teach? He teaches you to live properly. Beena?
It is not showing, it is not uploading for me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Carlos says, how does he teach? He shows things and tell what is what. How? You will see for yourself. Can you see now? The next day? Or the next time? Are you there, Beena? Okay. Tuesday, 30 January 1960. Jump in when you get, this is more conversation, so jump in when you get caught up, Beena. Did you hear? Beena may have dropped. Carlos says, what do you see when Mescalito takes you with him, Don Juan? Such things are not for ordinary conversation. I can't tell you that. Would something bad happen to you if you told? Mescalito is a protector, a kind, gentle protector. But that does not mean you can make fun of him because he's a kind protector. He can also be horror itself with those he does not like. I do not intend to make fun of him. I just want to know what he makes other people do or see. I described to you all that Mescalito made me see, Don Juan. With you, it is different. Perhaps because you don't know his ways. You have to be taught his ways as a child is taught how to walk. How long do I still have to be taught? Until he himself begins to make sense to you. And then you will understand by yourself. You won't have to tell me anything anymore. Can you just tell me where Mescalito takes you? I can't talk about it. All I want to know is if there is another world to which he takes people. There is. Is it heaven? The Spanish word for heaven is cielo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But that also means sky, ceiling maybe. It's a related word, I would imagine, just from an etymological point of view. He takes you through the sky, Silo. I mean, is it heaven, Silo, where God is? We are being stupid now. I don't know where God is. Is Mescalito God, the only God? Uh, or is he one of the gods? Seriously, Carlos, come on now, man. He's just a protector and a teacher. He's a power. Is he a power within ourselves? No. Mescalito has nothing to do with ourselves. He is outside us. Then everyone who takes Mescalito must see him in the same form. No, not at all. He is not the same for everybody. Tuesday, 12 April 1962. So big jump here, right? In the time, I think the last time we were in January. Yeah, see? So we go from January. The conversation is going to continue, but there's big gaps in between. All right, so keep in mind also, Joseph, keep in mind, we are hearing Don Juan through the filter of Carlos. Carlos picked these things out from all of his notes. Yeah, I mean, here we got 4 months here, right? More or less a gap, right? And so he comes back to this because he's on this topic. So this is edited conversation, and he's editing it and putting it into a native perspective because he's subtitled it the Yaqui Way of Knowledge, right? And so we're getting a distortion via Carlos. Now in the editing, yes, all that he's sharing is predominantly native, right? Because it's all about the stuff, right? But it's not all of what Don Juan is. And I'm making this emphasis, Joseph, because if we look at it in this book, we are going to come away thinking that all of what Don Juan is sharing is a native perspective. And that's not accurate. Right? In this book, it's presented so, but later we'll discover it's not accurate. Right? And it's very important to avoid this. Yes. I understand this, that what we're saying now, Joseph, I'm not saying what is now being shared is not native. Right? Let me make my point clear here. What now Carlos is sharing as an edited selection is native, because he's chosen to present this as a yucky way of knowledge, right? And he says yucky, not native. He says yucky. How much of it is yucky or not, I don't know, but certainly he's not presenting it as native in general, right? Just related to that. But I am saying that we need to be careful. Yes, what we see now is native. I'm not debating this, Joseph. I'm not saying separately, right? This is absolutely so. But what we are seeing now is absolutely not all of what Don Juan is sharing with Carlos. He's just editing it. When we go to book 2 and 3, we're going to see these same dates come up again, right? We're going to go back to 1961 in book 2. We're not going to carry on from where we left off in 65 or whatever it was, right? We're going to go back. Book 2 and 3 goes over all of these years again, right? It's very, very important to understand. In other words, there's a ton more stuff that Carlos is filtering out. So I'm not saying what he's sharing now isn't native. Yes, it is. It's native all around the world, not in these specific plants, but you go to any Sangoma in Southern Africa, right? And they were going to pull out some power plant. When you go to shamans in Siberia, same thing. Everybody uses power plants all around the world. It's very common, right? So when you say native perspective, uh, this is a perspective. Yes, Mescalito is specific to this geographical area, but the underlyingness of it, it's all around the world, right? It applies in native cultures all around the world, right? That have a similar thing, and they're using different plants, different entities, different names, but in the end, they come to the same thing, right? It's very powerful. It's very magical stuff. But I want to say it's not all there is to Don Juan. And I don't want to, because so many get locked into this initial first impression that is a distorted first impression created by Carlos. And then they start looking at everything else and insist on putting it into a native perspective. Right? And there's so much else that comes that is not from a what we regard generally as a negative perspective, right? There's a lot extra stuff there, very sophisticated stuff, very different stuff, very unusual stuff, and very potent stuff. Yeah, I mean, and you have to put it when you put it all together, you see how it belongs to his lineage. See, yeah. Right, exactly, exactly. And this is just Carlos and his arrogance from this academic arrogance. And just, this assumption that because Don Juan is a Yaqui, it's a Yaqui way of knowledge. It's just absurd of Carlos. But that is Carlos, right? Carlos is in this massive, absolute arrogant academic bubble. Right? That he puts it as a subtitle, you know what I mean? He doesn't say the teachings of Don Juan, a yucky man's sharing or something like that. You know what I mean? He says it's a yucky way of knowledge in general. So yeah, I never looked it up, but it's probably something that would be interesting to see. To actually go look up what the yuckies have to say about this book. I think it would be quite amusing, right? Anyway. I'm sure they they got a lot of unwanted attention because of it and mistaken attention. Right? A lot of people going to the Yaquis where they live and saying, "Hey, can you teach me about Mescalito or whatever?" And again, it's not something that the everyday person has access to. I mean, they have access to it, yes, but what takes off, right? As we see, some are like they like poo-poo what Don Juan says, and they like write it off. It's a lot of rubbish. That Mescalito, yeah, whatever. Right? And we'll see it later with his grandson, right? He knows about it, but he wants nothing to do with it. Don Juan's trying to get him involved, but no, he wants nothing to do with it. Julian is anyway, or Julio. Anyhow, so it's really fascinating. So all I'm trying to do here, Joseph, is prevent an immersion into an inaccurate bubble, right, that Carlos presents because of his bias, right? So that there's more than just yes. What he's sharing now is an indigenous perspective, which is a great word, right? And particularly in the case of Mescalito, it's a southwestern. If we take southwestern now, obviously include Mexico as well, right? But it's Sonoran Desert, really, right? Because Mescalito peyote only grows in the Sonoran Desert; it doesn't grow anywhere else in the world, right? So it's very specific to this particular region geographically. Now, in the Sonoran Desert, many different peoples come and go and connect, right? They'll all touch it. So, yes, but this is something that's very particular to this region. Right? It's very unique. It's quite magical, as we're going to discover later on. And it's not necessarily about ingesting it. As you said, the spirit is there. But you don't necessarily have to. Carlos has a massive interaction later on with Mescalito, simply because he walks through a field of the plants, right? Grow, right? Just walking in a field, and he has this intense interaction with Mescalito, right? Very powerful. So that to me is very cool. All right, let's see, where were we? Yeah, Tuesday, 12 April 1962. Why don't you tell me more about Mescalito, Don Juan? There is nothing to tell. There must be thousands of things I should know before I encounter him again. No. Perhaps for you there is nothing you have to know. As I've already told you, he is not the same for everyone. I know, but I still like to know how others feel about him. The opinion of those who care to talk about him is not worth much. You will see. You will probably talk about him up to a certain point, and from then on, you will never discuss it. Can you tell me about your own experiences? What for? Then I'll know how to behave with Mescalito. Yeah, really, Carlos. Anyway, you already know more than I do. You actually played with him. Someday you will see how kind the protector was with you. That first time I'm sure he told you many, many things, but you were deaf and blind. And here we get to understand Carlos. Carlos is very peculiar. in this, that on the one hand he is completely like a very young child, right? But on the other hand, he has this academic brain, right? Which, yes, there's some sophistication to it, but that sophistication doesn't translate into the other side of him. So, to one hand, he's intelligent, and the other hand, he's very stupid. Both go together, right? And Donna Soledad really kind of lets him have it at one point, and gets very annoyed with him for being this knucklehead who knows more but doesn't know anything. It's fascinating. It's fascinating that Carlos cannot, because he doesn't abstract his knowing, so he can't apply it in other places, right? And it's a great loss for him. It really makes a big difference, and it's one of the reasons why, for me, abstracting is so good. I remember when I was a boy, long before I came into contact with Carlos and Don Juan, when I first came into connection and became aware of this concept of abstract. Yeah? It was a visual experience. And there was a visuality that went with it. It was very profound, and I wasn't given to seeing things in visualness, right? It was one of very few instances. But this term abstract was so powerful that it had this vision kind of associated with it, right? A visual representation of the term. And we see here the power of the necessity for Carlos to take this in the abstract and apply it to his behavior in other ways. He can't do that. That's why he's struggling with this learning, because he's thinking purely academically. And academic learning is about memory. You've got to know every little detail, right? Fill up your hard drive. It's not learning, it's memorization. And look at our whole school. It's all about memorization. The educational institutions all around the world have sadly confused learning and memorization. It's not the same thing. Very sad. And we see it here with Carlos. He wants to know all these details so he can stuff it in his brain and remember them. And when the time comes, he thinks he'll be able to remember whatever he needs to and apply it. No, that's not how to do it. Learn the abstract and apply it as appropriate on demand. Right? Saturday, 14 April 1962. Does Mescalito take any form when he shows himself? Yes, any form. Carlos's question is meaning variety, and Don Juan has a little bit of a play on the words there, and it little bypasses Carlos a little bit. Yes, any form. Then, which are the most common forms you know? There are no common forms. You mean, Don Juan, that he appears in any form, even to men who know him well? No. He appears in any form to those who know him only a little, but to those who know him well, he is always constant. How is he constant? He appears to them sometimes as a man, like us, or as a light. Does Mescalito ever change his permanent form with those who know him well? Not to my knowledge. Right? So every time, look at this now, right? We're reading this as one long conversation. But if you look at the dates, right? Very easy to forget these dates. April, June, and we were in January. So this is a massive editing process to put this seemingly one long conversation. It's not one long conversation. These are separate conversations months apart. Right? So the editing is very distorting here. And I will continue tomorrow. So very cool, very cool. Thanks for the comments, Joseph. I love it. I love these comments, man. I love your sharing. I love your sharing. And, because perspective with Don Juan is everything. And Carlos does such a good job of distorting the perspective here in book 1 that I want to avoid this trap of falling into a perspective bubble, right? Because it matters later on. It really, really matters. And anytime we fall into a perspective bubble, we end up distorting our perception. Right? So we have to be super, super careful of perspective bubbles. Super careful. Yeah. Oh yeah. So Joseph says, one reason why the native or indigenous perspective needs to be ingrained into the sharing is that those that are listening may not have the base knowledge to understand some important points. For example, if you are entering this world, the separate reality is very dangerous if you don't know that spirits can cause pathology simply because how you treat the spirits. Yes, and that's why why Joseph? I don't know if you watched maybe in the early parts, and I've been repeating this constantly. Maybe I didn't say it in the last one or one before, but I'm making this point. That's to from my sharing perspective, and I want to put this as a caution that what Carlos is sharing here about the spirits and about Mescalito and the power plants and the allies, or what Don Juan is sharing, is not something which is usable as shared here. Why? Because we do not have access to Don Juan or someone like Don Juan. Without that, you are running a massive risk, right? And Don Juan will tell you too, and he does mention that yes, this is dangerous. He said it multiple times. So yes, to me, anybody that's got any modicum or any measure of sensibility, you're not going to try this on your own. You need to have an appropriate guide. Now, they can be, depending on which path you're going to go, what you're going to do, it's got many different ways, right, of entering into this. But it's very important that you do have a guide, because like anything, without it, anything that is potential danger to it. Now, anybody at least who's grown up in the Western world is going to realize that you're talking about serious drugs, right, hallucinogens, etc. That yes, these things can have a very serious effect on your brain and your psychology, and so they are aware that there are dangers and negative consequences. Absolutely, but yeah, the point I want to make is twofold. One, that there's much more to Don Juan than this power plant focus that Carlos has here, right? And Carlos overemphasizes it, and later Don Juan is going to tell him that it was wildly overemphasized to him specifically because he's an idiot. But in Don Juan's greater lineage and teaching, some of the apprentices only do take power plants once. Once. That's it. Right? It's not the principal part of their teaching. And beside which, that is just simply to enable a transition for them. Right? But the key part, which is the warrior's way, as Don Juan calls it, right? And all the teachings that go with that, that's way more important. Then you've got stalking and intent and dreaming, and those separate categories of teaching. There's so much more to come. By the time those apprentices got to that one transition point, they weren't learning about power plants. It wasn't a part of their teaching. The part of the teachings, the key core of it was how to be, how to be. And that's a very universal teaching, right? Like I'll point out later on now it comes across, right? So this book is so distorted, and this distortion of this focus, this overly emphasized focus on this one particular aspect of what Don Juan shares, it's very, very distorting, and we must be careful of that. For me, I never really focused. It was interesting, but I said I can't use it, so it's of no use to me. It's interesting, but not important. It's interesting, but not important. Yeah? Because I can't use it. Yeah? I can't do it on my own. And to me, I absolutely refuse to believe that 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 there is preciseness, specificness to paths. Yeah, that there must be a path that allows you to get there if you are not in contact with these people. Now, maybe attunement will put you into contact with those who can show this to you. But again, I don't think it's absolutely crucial. Again, it's not absolutely crucial, as Don Juan will tell you later on, like for some of the apprentices, just at one time. So, as maybe for that transition, yes, but even then, I don't think it's crucial there if I understand everything there correctly. Right? So, this is important that the moreness that Don Juan shares, this is a small, small part of it. It's 100% focused here in this book. But look at the four enemies, right? I mean, that is a huge. That to me is the real stuff. At least the stuff that I can use for me, the real learning. This stuff I can't use. So yes, it's interesting and it's valuable potentially, but that's not something I can use. So yeah, I've made this emphasis very clear, Joseph, that and to obviously try and do this on your own is just foolishness. I also sort of take it for granted that people won't try this on their own because, well, how are you going to do this? Or not all the steps are there. You cannot do it on your own. And I would assume people wouldn't be that foolish to try and concoct some idea of their own, just make it up, But maybe I shouldn't assume on foolishness. Yeah. Anyway, it's fascinating stuff, though. It's really fascinating. But I really want to minimize this focus on the hallucinogens, in other words, right? Which is where Carlos is coming at, and your non-native reader would come at it from this perspective of hallucinogens and drugs. No, that was the big deal in the 60s, yes, and it was seen as the path to everywhere. But as time went by, they realized the limitations. It's still around, that path, right? You see it like in Ayurveda and everything, right? Of course, with peyote, church of peyote still exists, etc. Of course, it's still around, but people have come to realize that there's more, right? Much, much more. If we look at just what I'm sharing, taking all of what I've done, created on my own, and pulled from places, put together from all the different, right? My entire life's work, right, as represented in Way-Of-Impeccability, capital H theory, and the psychology of superiority paradigm, nobility, etc. Right? None of that has anything to do with this. But the value that is gained from what I share, like people do Way-Of-Impeccability, changes their lives completely. They become different people. It's transformative, right? So we can transform without power plants. Yeah, it can be done. And it's a less stressful way on the body and the mind and psychology. It's a lot less risk to it, right? But in the end, you still have to apply whatever Mescalito teaches you. And in that application, this is Way-Of-Impeccability. It's all about application, 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 right? And all of it, capital H hearing, it's all application. Understanding superiority paradigm, it's all about application. So yeah, so for me, the emphasis here is what I'm trying to avoid, the inadvertent emphasis that Carlos is distorting here, becoming a bubble that we get caught up in. Right? And I'm very keen to get to the end of the book so that we can break out of this bubble. This whole book is this, and I very much contemplated skipping this first book because of this. But there is some, those like the four enemies and other things that Don Juan talks about, right? That coming in between. The real teachings to me are about this way of being, character, the warrior's way, in other words. Those are, they go to character, right? Our internal character, not personality, but character. And that's to me the real juice. Again, this is to me, right? Because as I can say, I can substantiate that because that's something that anybody can apply. Whereas these teach, the things to do with the hallucinogens, the power plant, spirit, etc. Those are things you need a guide for, and you don't all have access to those guides, right? And I know in the bubble that I was in back at the time in South Africa, absolutely no access to this, right? When I was a kid, long before I was completely, I couldn't even talk to anybody about my path and journey of awareness. If I even used the word awareness, I'd be looked at funny. Yeah. So it's a very conservative society. You didn't do things on your own. You had to follow the church stuff. Learning on your own. I would have gotten canings for just sharing this idea. It was like radical and revolutionary, and radical and revolutionary, anything that's difficult becomes heretical and becomes sinful by, so that's just stupid stuff. So very important to understand context here. Context is like abstract and incredibly powerful conception. To understand context, and the term context, like spirit, it translates to many things. Context, abstract. Very important to understand context when it comes to Don Juan. Absolutely essential and critical. And here, Carlos is making a distortion of context, right? And it's making it appear that Don Juan is coming at things from this, well, if we already now made the distinction between Yaki, but to also say Don Juan is indigenous only. No, he has indigenous perspective, yes, but not only. I have lots of African perspective. Yes, I'm African. I was born there. I grew up there. My parents did. Their grandparents did. 17 generations. Yeah, but people are gonna give me a hard time for saying I'm African. I'm as African as most Americans are American. Yeah, my family was there. So again, see, terminology sometimes bubbles. Yeah. No, I'm not taking any offense. Not at all, Joseph. I love your comments. They're quite wonderful. I'm not making the point for you. I'm making the point for anybody listening because it's such a subtle point and it's so easy to get lost in it because of the way Carlos has distorted it. Yeah. And you said there also most foundational indigenous knowledge is the story already. Yes. I think you are shortchanging it because you are missing a lot of it. I'm not missing any of it, Joseph. I really am not. I'm not missing any of it. I'm simply choosing not to emphasize that aspect of it because it is a small part of the greater whole. If I emphasize the Buddhist part when that comes up, or the other parts, like the strategic part, and that Musashi Sun Tzu, yeah, those you can say, wow, yeah, this is all from Sun Tzu, this is all Musashi. No, it's all Don Juan. That's it. It's all Don Juan, right? He pulls things from everywhere. Right now, we are seeing what he is pulling from the indigenous perspective. Yes, but it's part of his knowledge, not all of it. Part, part. So really, I don't mean to shortchange it. I just don't want to focus on the drug part because when this book came out, and a lot of people understand. If you talk to people now who tapped into Carlos back in the day, oh, Carlos, yeah, it's all about the drugs. They have this view and impression still today. Yeah. 50 years later. So no, this is I'm really trying to prevent something that absolutely is very important, and that is the distortion of perspective, right? And as you see, the books, they got categorized as indigenous at some point, under anthropology, and then Native American. They got put in those categories in the bookshelves and in the library. And over time, that shifted, and they moved into more general, like abstract psychology, philosophy, self-improvement, etc. Right? So each new book came out, and the books got shifted on the shelves because I witnessed this as it happened. Right? It's quite fascinating, really fascinating. So yeah, no, absolutely no offense taken, Joseph. I'm just it's a tricky point to share. Yes, it's a very tricky point to share. But yeah, I certainly am not missing or shortchanging the indigenous perspective. It is important in the bubble context, yes, but in the greater context, no, it's not. Right? Uh, it's in the greater context as we go through the entirety of the books, we are going to see how the indigenous perspective becomes less and less emphasized and less of a focus. Right? So we'll end it there today. Beena was calling me because she dropped and she can't get back on Zoom, I'm assuming. So something there. So just please understand me, Joseph. I'm not looking to in any way say the indigenous perspective isn't important. It is, but it's as important as everything else in what Don Juan shares. And he doesn't only share indigenous perspective. He shares many perspectives from all around the world. I mean, you can go and look up. There's a guy who wrote a whole book about this, right? How it gets pulled. His name is Richard DeMille, right? And I'm trying to remember what. Anyway, I think Richard B. DeMille. Anyway, Richard DeMille. If you just put up Google Richard DeMille, Carlos, it will come up, right? One of the early books that were written. There's one or two before him that were written specifically on Carlos and his books, and that was very popular book, right? And he'll tell you everywhere, oh, Don Juan says this, oh, it comes from here. Carlos says this, oh, it comes from here, right? And then you really see the internationalness of this. Now, did Carlos, according to Richard DeMille, Carlos stole all of the stuff, and Don Juan is fictitious. And the mill is very incensed at this idea that the Don Juan is Carlos saying is real. You know, I never understood this from day go. It mattered not one iota to me if Don Juan is fictional or real. It's totally irrelevant. The teachings transcend real or unreal as a person. And this idea that the teachings are only valuable if the person is real is totally idiotic. We learn stuff from the movies and entertainment all the time, and we know it's not real. Right? So the abstract teaching is what matters. Right? It doesn't matter whether Don Juan is real or not. And you know, this now is not such a big debate anymore. But back then, oh my goodness, this was the only debate. It completely consumed everything. Right? I mean, you either were in the camp of you believed Don Juan was real or not. You know, I came along and I said, I don't care either way. You know, what difference does it make? Yeah, I was the only one. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So very, a lot of moreness involved in this. A lot of moreness. Yeah. So the indigenous perspective, of course, it's important, but so is every other one, right? And I just want to mention it's more about the drug focus. Carlos and Don Juan especially is not about drugs, but this book is so predominantly focused on that. It has led to this assumption that, oh yeah, Carlos, yeah, there's that guy who's all about the drug stuff. I don't know how many times I've seen and heard that. It's fascinating. Because over the years, I asked a lot of people, you know, talk a lot about the books and reading. You know, you read Carlos. Oh yeah, I read Carlos. Yeah, is that guy all about the drug stuff? And they may go say more specifically, oh, it's fascinating. It's all about these trips and you know the Native American stuff. They may bring that Native American indigenous into it, but they miss the point. You know, they miss the bigger picture. Right? This first book is very distorting, but to me, I think it's the universe. I think the universe impacted and affected Carlos in a way, and this is my big overview perspective here, in such a way that he distorted this. And the reason why the universe is doing this is because I feel it is a way to test and see who has what it takes to follow the entire path. If you only see this first book as being all about the drugs and that's what you focus on, you're not going to get very far in the series. And you're going to get stuck in that perspective and you get lost in the narrowness of the whole drug perspective, whether it's now indigenous power plants, you know, spirit, mescalito, whatever, or just drugs in general. Right? Because a lot of people go to other stuff like MD and M, if I remember the initials correctly, stuff like that, right? Which is synthetic, yes. It's the same idea, but it's synthetic. Or at least they're trying to get to the same idea because, again, of course, they don't understand spirit and all this stuff, right? So that's why the indigenous perspective matters to understand spirit here. Yeah, but still, you know, they're looking to affect brain chemistry. You know, Aldous Huxley was taking mescaline rather than mescalito, right? I mean, he wrote a very famous book on it. It's very fascinating reading. But again, you know, doesn't really get him anywhere. Right? So this entire perspective is, to me, I think this focus is a test by the universe to see, are you going to go for the stuff that really matters, which is the stuff of character? You cannot possibly engage in any kind of power plant activity or any kind of drugs, hallucinogens, whatever, enhancers, whatever you want to do, you know, psychology distorters or shifters, if you do not have your fundamentals in place. This is what Way-Of-Impeccability is all about. It's getting your foundation in place, getting your character in place. Without that, whatever you do, whether it be drugs or business or love or relationships or anything you do becomes problematic. Whereas when you have your fundamentals in place, your character is solid, then you can do anything and you're going to be okay. So to me, that comes first. It has to come first. As we see with Carlos, he doesn't have the character foundations and he gets this all messed up. Now, in all of this time that we are listening to Carlos here, talk about Mescalito with Don Juan. Don Juan has been at the same time been sharing character creation, character building, character foundational things with him, as we're going to see in books 2 and 3. Right? When we go back over this time period from a whole different perspective. Don Juan has been pushing impeccability into Carlos like crazy, or trying to, but it bounces off Carlos because his arrogance is so much. He doesn't think he needs to learn to be a better person. He's already okay. Yeah. So it bounces off him. Yeah. But this is very key. And it's part of way of impeccability. Right? I mean, yes, people are coming to it wanting more. But I still have encountered that with the students at some point, right? They come up with, to the boundaries and barriers of their self-awareness, their self-perception, right? And well, I kind of know, and then they realize, oh my God, there's so much more that I didn't know. And this is a very difficult transition where they have to let go of the worldview that they had. Well, I kind of know what's going on. Yes, I want to learn a bit more, and of course, there's more to learn, but I kind of know how the world works and how things work and how or what's going on. But then, as they get into way of impeccability, they realize, oh no, actually, I thought I kind of knew, but I don't really have a clue. And that's very severe. It leads to a bit of depression, even, right? And many of the participants have said to me, you got to put this up as a warning to let people know that they may have to go through that dip, right? I call it worldview collapse, right? And worldview collapse is a very important thing. And Carlos doesn't quite get to that worldview collapse. It takes him a long time, right? And we don't know, he never talks about it directly, but it's sort of implied that he goes through it at some point. Yeah. Well, he has another worldview collapse in another way, but that just causes him to abandon the learning. But he doesn't quite understand this. So lot of stuff, lot of stuff. Yeah, I love your comments, Joseph. I absolutely love it. It's too fantastic. You know, alternative perspectives and sharing. This is what I'm all about. You know, I'm never about agreeing. I don't care to agree or disagree. It's not part of my language. I care to understand. Right? So in our conversations, we are building understanding, which is fantastic, Joseph. So that's why I love when we share like this. Absolutely fantastic. It's really great. And when we focus on understanding, that's where we come to it. Yes, I mean, I can understand and disagree. I understand you love eggs, maybe. I can't stand them. I never ate eggs all my life. Right? See? So I don't agree necessarily about eggs, but I understand. So understanding much more important than agree or disagree. Agree and disagree, that's superiority paradigm logic. I want to move out of that into Moreness logic, Moreness awareness, Moreness culture. It's about understanding, sharing, sharing, sharing. We have so many different perspectives, right? It's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's like colors. There's no right or wrong to colors. They just are. You can't say one color is better than another. You'll end up in a mono view. No, very distorting. Beena, any comments? I know you missed much, but anything to add on the end here?
Yes, I missed because of my network and it was struggling. But what you were saying, so it makes a whole lot of sense that how we assume things and we have this conditioning that okay, yes, first I know it all. Okay, some people don't say that like, I know it all, but at least they say I know,
Yeah,
which like okay, we cannot be sure 100% what we really know. Even the subject we are talking about right now, of course,
exactly.
it is just right now. This is my perspective. Right now, this is my understanding. And of course, it is open for any update as long as it is okay, not being updated.
Exactly.
So
It's
that's why it
only
is
as good as it lasts from way of impeccability,
exactly,
that quote, right?
exactly, exactly. So this is again very, very important thing to always remember, always keep it in mind that whatever I'm saying right now, it is valid, true, valuable for me in this moment. Of course, it can be upgraded, changed, edited just in the next second. So that's it. Okay, we need to be open always for that. And the second thing, when you were saying about, okay, I'm trying to understand and assume that, okay, oh, this is not coming from this person, this is from this. And so what? Isn't it the ego sentence right there when we talk about, oh,
Exactly.
this is from this and that? Yes, it is always good to give credit to someone who has been doing work. Yes, but it doesn't make any difference in the value of those things, in value to those sharings. It does add to our impeccability that okay, yes, we want to give credit. Okay, yes, if it is appropriate right now, but When it is appropriate, it becomes irrelevant when you are sharing something. It doesn't
Yeah,
make any difference. It is coming from Carlos or from Don Juan or from somewhere
exactly.
else. Right
Exactly.
now, we are sharing what they have been sharing with us. So right now, we are sharing
Exactly.
what Don Juan was sharing, okay,
Exactly.
via Carlos, but still, we are sharing what he has. Because why it is so important? Because the source, yes, it comes first time, someone yet definitely gets some understanding, some new awareness. But as time pass, they also update it. Like, okay, because they get more clarity, they get more data about it, they get more understanding and awareness, and they refine it. So yes, okay, it's
Exactly.
not the exact original thought. Now I'm understanding it more. And the next person, when they hear from them or they read from them, they apply it in their culture, in their understanding, in their situation, and then it becomes something more. Okay, yes, now it is pertinent and relevant to me. Okay, I have been sharing from that person. Now what I'm going to share will make more sense to people in the same situation, same understanding. Okay, but they will go more, and of course they will go further, and they will change, and they will, this is how things grow. Yes, the seed is there,
Exactly.
but what is important right now? Tree, fruit.
Exactly. It's wonderful, Beena. It's wonderful. In all what I'm sharing here, the drug part, I'm going to call it drug because in at least in like typical America and in other parts of the world, Europe, South Africa, for instance, and probably in Japan and so on, Australia, whatever. Right? This is the focus. Oh, it's all about the drugs. Book one is all about the drugs. Because Carlos has made it this focus through editing, right? And I want to
Yes.
avoid this focus on the drugs. Yes, power plants, hallucinogens, however you want to call it, right? There is a moreness to it, which gets missed. Yes, the moreness of spirit, for instance, and how this works. But it's still the focus is on this drug focus. And somebody might say, yes, so but you're saying this isn't of use to you, and you're right, you can't use it because you can't replicate it, we don't have access to it, but other people have access to it. But for you, why do you then read it if you find it so non-useful? There's other use that I get out of the conversation. Doesn't matter what the topic is, the way in which Carlos asks questions, or how he asks questions, his assumptions, his beliefs, his ideas, and how Don Juan responds. In other words, the relationship between them. I can glean a ton of information and get to understand and know Carlos and Don Juan from those conversations. Doesn't matter what they're talking about. So the topic of the conversation isn't important. The conversation itself is. This is the power of abstract thinking. See, I am when I'm reading these conversations about Mescalito, I am gleaning and gaining an idea, a feeling, an understanding of Carlos and Don Juan in terms of who they are, both personality and character. More importantly, character, of course, right? But we get to see their style and way of interacting through these conversations. And that is the value. That's why I don't skip it, because I'm getting to know both Carlos and especially Don Juan. That's what's important here, right? And the teachings, to me, the teachings that teach about character, as we'll see later on, this is what's important, even though Don Juan never uses, or Carlos never uses, that I remember this word character. Yeah. Uh, it is used, but not as a general rule, right? I mean, he talks about the warrior's way and impeccability on a very regular basis, right? And being a man of knowledge and being a warrior, that's synonymous with having character. That's what I would call. That's to me the teachings that are important. This part about the drugs, the power plants, etc., it has much interest and it can potentially be valuable, but because it's not replicatable, it's not accessible, to me, it's not the focus, right? And also, I want to avoid the undue focus on it. For Carlos, it's done repetitively many times, way more than anybody else, way more than anybody else, any of the other apprentices, because Carlos is a special case. So we must be careful to not take Carlos's experience and assume it is the typical experience. Very dangerous. Can't do that. Can't do that. All right, let's end it there. Let's end it there. I love it, Joseph. Please, please keep going, keep sharing. I love it. It's very cool. Sharing is what the Moreness culture is all about. Right? Nobelia, everything happening on Nobelia. Nobelia is Moreness culture with particular spin. Right? It's not, again, like I mentioned long ago. I said Nobelia is not something that I'm saying everybody must do or should do. That's a superiority paradigm assumption to say when I find something important, I say everybody must do it. No, that's not so. In Moreness culture, I'm simply saying I like it. I find it valuable. I find it important. Like me saying chartreuse is my favorite color. I'm not saying it must be that way for everybody. So superiority paradigm, it really presses us to make many assumptions which are very, very invalid and flawed and unuseful and cause a lot of problems. So I want to be very careful about that. And this whole first book is about discernment. I mentioned that right in the beginning, that we have to understand discernment here. Discernment, discernment, discernment. And when we look at Don Juan from the perspective of attunement, then we're really going to understand, right? Right now, we are looking at a non-attunement perspective, like we ordinarily relate to someone in sharing information. No, it's all about attunement. We'll see this later on, right? Yeah, more or less. So all about perspective, context, 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 context. Very, very important. Brilliant. Anything, Beena, to finish
Yes.
with?
Yes. No, it is okay. It is a very good point to end it today. Thanks for joining us live, and those watching the recording on YouTube, Substack, and FB group Sassy. Please do subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell because it's a gentle reminder to not miss anything valuable in your life. Most important, leave a comment and or ask a question. This will help us to train, of course, our algorithm, but also your algorithm, online algorithm, to bring more goodness and value in your life. As it is connected to your life algorithm. If you want more value in your life, please do subscribe to channels like these, which are trying to
Yes.
share some value and goodness. So thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Joseph. Bye-bye,
Bye.
Norma. Bye-bye,
Yes.
everybody. Bye-bye, everybody on IG as well. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
All right. And meeting for all.